All right, so next up on our program, this is going to be really cool. You are going to hear more wisdom from the C-suite as we explore the role of CIO as an organizational change agent, driving the culture and the mindset needed to create a great workplace. This panel will be moderated by industry analyst and host of CXOTALK, Michael Krigsman. He is one of the most respected industry analysts in the world, dealing with issues such as CIO innovation. Please welcome to our Zoomtopia stage, along with Michael, Yousuf Khan from Pure Storage, Casey Santos from General Atlantic, Pradeep Mannakkara from Cvent, and Massimo Rapparini from Logitech. Come on up.
Thank you. I love this. We have the Spartan chairs because, after all, we are IT. And that totally works. I'm Michael Krigsman. So I am an industry analyst, and CXOTALK is a live-streamed video show where we interview C-level executives, the most innovative C-level executives in the world from the largest organizations. And I am a very happy paid customer of Zoom, as you all are. And very quickly, the way I started using Zoom, so I was using Google Hangouts. And I'm interviewing people like, the chief marketing officer of General Electric, or the CEO of Century 21, or amazing CIOs like these folks. And Google Hangouts, it really sucked because it would crash and there were bugs. And I was interviewing the chief marketing officer of Arrow Electronics, which is like a $30 billion company, and the thing just stopped. And he was really good about it, but I said, okay, Google Hangouts no more for me, and Zoom just works, which is actually the best thing I can possibly say about it. So this panel is focused on the role of the CIO, how CIOs can contribute to workplace happiness, and looking at CIOs as change agents and looking at IT as change agents, helping us become digital organizations. And so without further ado, I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves. It's an amazing group.
Hi all, I'm Casey Santos. I'm the CIO at General Atlantic. We are a private equity firm that you'd probably know better by some of our portfolio companies. We do global investing and growth companies. Some of our current portfolio companies, Box, Uber, Airbnb, Snap. So as you can imagine, my business partners have high expectations of technology.
Great. Hi, I'm Pradeep Mannakkara. I'm with Cvent. We are the global leader in events and meetings.
Hi, I'm Yousuf Khan. I'm CIO of Pure Storage. I oversee, really means two things. One is I oversee all corporate IT at Pure Storage, and the second, that it's usually always my fault. So.
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Massimo Rapparini. I'm the CEO of Logitech. If you haven't checked our booth out, you should do it later. Sorry for the plug. But we're a big Zoom customer ourselves, and besides being a customer, we're a partner as well. Really excited to be here and looking forward to some of the dialogue.
Okay, so we're talking about workplace happiness, and we have 4 highly innovative CIOs. And I guess the first question that really comes to mind, and Casey, maybe I'll direct this to you. What does workplace happiness have to do with IT anyways?
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard IT and happiness in the same sentence.
Well, that's why, yeah.
You have any answers?
Oh, you're punting it to me.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to keep this easy. Yousuf, my friend.
No, these are just
go ahead.
Massimo, you've got to help.
All right, I'll try and give it a shot. So I think there's 2 ways definitely to answer the question. First of all, happy employees are more productive employees. And if productive employees is not the CIO's job, I don't know whose job it is, right? So that's, I think, one way that we contribute to happiness. And the second thing is, think about workers in the modern workforce today in terms of how they actually get their job done and how much technology they actually have to digest every day, what we potentially inflict on them as an IT organization. So I think we have a direct impact on their happiness, and again, the link to productivity is surely the way that we can actually impact that.
Yeah, and I think it's grown. You know, we as people have used more technology at home. You know, the conversations over the years have gotten much more fun because people want to use the latest technology that they saw their friend have, or the different, you know, latest smartphone app. So it's our role in it has increased.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity to be able to deliver that into the workplace has definitely increased as well, especially as kind of cloud applications like Zoom come into the workplace. It's actually, that's the opportunity to be able to not just make people more productive, but as a result of them, kind of give them much more fulfillment in their roles.
So it's about the technology then, right?
Actually, I'd say it's around the simplicity. Right? I look at a lot of consumerization that's happening, right? We have kind of access to so much nowadays, but the question becomes, how do we enable that in the enterprise so that we simplify how we're all doing what we need to do to get our jobs done? So I actually look at it from a user experience standpoint. We also need to make sure things are secure, right? So there's sort of that seal of quality that we're kind of taking into account, as whether it comes from us or if it comes from our internal audience that suggests that we should look at a product or tool or technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to think about is we're kind of going into a zone of kind of a user experience type economy. Mm-hmm. And therefore, when you're in the workplace, you know, a lot of these applications, they're just, the experiences can be very unforgiving. So the video that was shown earlier this morning, I mean, you know, we can laugh about it, but part of the issue is if you are a sales individual or if you are someone who's working on a project and that basically happens to you, it's really, really unpleasant. And therefore, I think the roles that we basically have and kind of some of the innovation that we sort of tap into is the ability to be able to improve that user experience, right? And I think that's where the opportunity lies.
So the technology, seriously, the technology is a kind of baseline, can we say. The technology has to work, but then what are you layering on top of that technology to help drive change through the organization? And what are the types of changes that you're trying to drive in the first place?
Well, I think maybe one thing is collaboration, which is what Zoom, as an example, is all about. And for sure, the technology underlying it kind of takes away the hassle of making it enabling people to actually connect. But at the end of the day, it's the collection of all the pieces that, as a CIO, you bring together in the company for people to actually be collaborative. And if you look at how the workforce is evolving, much more fragmented, much more looking for a two-way kind of conversations with their employer, I think that collaboration type of capability that we need to put into the organization is really key in terms of what IT can do.
For us, I think the thing that we've been able to layer on that has had an effect is, when I started my role 3 years ago, we had all these tools. We had this app and that app, and every time somebody went out to do a regular task, they'd have to open up 3 different apps and go back and forth between them. So it's really exciting where we are right now when you have all these great platforms that are available, the Zoom platform, the Salesforce platform, Box, Okta, you name it. And if you can stitch those together in a way that works the way that people work, that's where we actually start to really unlock some productivity and value and create more happiness.
Yeah, I think one of the things to understand is like a lot of the companies that we are, probably from kind of last few years onwards, they have an element of software involved in every single one of their products, right? Or they're having to be able to completely revolutionize their user experience. And as a result of that, I think companies, candidly speaking, are being kind of forced into being much more collaborative, right? And being able to connect their individuals together because they need to respond to market needs. And so, when you talk about company culture or you talk about better product, fundamentally, the enablement to be able to make that happen comes down to high quality improvement in kind of the collaborative nature of how you operate as a business. And that doesn't just mean that, you have a good conferencing solution. or which is enabled by an amazing Logitech camera.
Thank you.
There you go. But I think that's also because when you look at platforms like Salesforce or Workday or ServiceNow, what you'll typically see is those are being built to be able to enable that collaboration across those different functions, right? And that applies to Zoom, and it applies to a whole bunch of other SaaS organizations which are building across the platform.
I also look at it as if I can have an experience where people aren't thinking of it as IT or technology, and we're solving the business problem or whatever accounting problem, HR problem that we're trying to get done, you're going to end up with a better user experience, better product, better everything for that matter. So what we try to do is find as many of these solutions that, and I think to your point, what's nice is the third parties tend to work together, right? So when they're working together, it makes our jobs much easier, much more seamless. And as we roll out these different solutions and the business is adopting them and using them, it's less about the technology, it's more about are we enabling people to do what they need to get done.
And to that point, you're all what I would call cloud CIOs, meaning you're all using cloud technology very heavily. So in effect, you're outsourcing that infrastructure, which historically was the province of IT. So you're handing off the traditional role or traditional activities, many of them, of IT.
Yeah, which I think is a positive, right? At the end of the day, there's little value add in just operating a lot of infrastructure, making sure things don't break. And if you can have people that can do that on a world scale and a massive scale and a much more robust service levels, then all goodness, right? The better for it. And that way, I think IT can actually focus on things that are much more value add, right? Where we can be not necessarily the owners of technology. I think a lot of the employees these days bring ideas that we can actually help vet, validate, and shepherd such that they can actually work in the workplace, but also be the ones that actually drive digital business in reality, right? In terms of how we interact with partners or how people actually buy our products online or how we develop our products.
Yeah, I look at the cloud as kind of the great equalizer. And we're a small company, and so we don't have the IT teams that can run storage and run all these different things. And if that's what we're spending our time on, we're not connecting on a business level as business partners, because I like to think of IT as now part of the business. We're not IT and business, we are one. Mm-hmm. And so, having your infrastructure work is kind of table stakes, and if that's all you're spending your time on, you're missing out on the good stuff. So I love that as a small company, I can leverage all these great experts that have created these great cloud platforms to create a solution that makes people happy.
I think it doesn't, though, alleviate the responsibility that we have to make sure that the products that we put in, though, whether it's cloud or not, is solid, right? It's got to hold up, it's got to work, it's got to be available. So I think there's that, work that IT still has to do. Yeah. And then also linking it together, right? So that is it truly rolled out, implemented to the satisfaction levels that the business needs. So those aspects of what we do really haven't changed.
Well, you do have this level of what we might call operational excellence, which is the foundation that the technology has to work. And if you don't have operational excellence, then you're not going to have, if things are breaking down, if email doesn't work, then nobody's going to be listening to you about, how we can collaborate, be strategic partners. Yeah. Right, so you have to have that first.
Right. Yeah, I think job number one, right, I think is credibility building, right, by actually providing service that people can rely on. And a lot of that becomes a little invisible, and it's kind of like paradox, right? If it's invisible, what's the value? But I think it creates that trust that people will actually want to talk to you and listen to you. And earlier on, I think it was you, Casey, you were talking about the experience and how important that is. And Logitech is an experience design company. And I think it's a great example of where I'd like to take a page from our product teams, right? Empathize, put myself in the shoes of the users that actually leverage our technology. And that way also have the right to have a better conversation than just pushing stuff down their throat or not focusing on the operational piece.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to kind of add is and I know we're talking about workplace happiness, but unfortunately, probably a whole bunch of people in the audience have come from a place of unhappiness. Right? That exists because you don't have operational excellence, or you're basically being forced to be able to look at operational issues on on a regular basis.
But Yousuf, you forgot, that's made our job easier.
Oh, it has? Oh, I forgot that memo. That's good. Okay, good. But on a serious note, part of the unhappiness, so to speak, is that there's too much, right? And that causes confusion.
There's too much unhappiness?
No, there's I would say it gets confusing when you start to basically buy everything. I'm with the Logitech
sort of,
here, basically, yeah, exactly. No, I think the reality is that when you have the abundance of innovation that's kind of happening and you're bringing that into your organization, you have to be very careful about making best use of it, number one. And change management adoption, for those people who are trying to roll out Zoom or have gone, yes, it's a fantastic product, but just like every other solution, change management is really hard, right? And that's driven on the fact that most people have looked at IT from a prism of saying, well, here's another solution and the rollout's not going to be great and the experience is not going to be good. I think that's where the transformation has changed with, we've had to go into a role where we're much more better connected within the business and understand it. Therefore being much more thoughtful about being business partners, but we're also much focused on the user experience now than I think ever before.
So just to be clear, so when you talk about change management, what you're saying, and correct me if I've misinterpreted this, what you're saying is, so today we have one type of system, and at 5 o'clock it's being turned off, and at 5:01 we have a new system for you to use,
right.
And you have to learn.
But it's usually based on the email that you didn't read 4 weeks ago.
Right, based on the email that you didn't
the third
read,
email
and that we forgot to send.
Right,
you're
exactly,
on the road,
exactly.
You have a very
right.
important meeting, and now you can't get onto your system.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
So
that's how to do it.
Change management is hard, right? But I think the point that we have to make is if you come out from a perspective of being able to provide change by not like focusing on the technology, but being articulate and being transparent about why we're making the change and the improvement it's going to deliver, that's the important piece. Unfortunately, for a large part of our peer group, and we can be guilty of that as well, not Pradeep because he's cool, it's been sent to the fact that we've said, well, we're kind of responding to something. Now it's actually the opportunity now with a lot of the solutions that are out there, including Zoom, where you're like, can I really make an improvement in the user experience and deliver this? We've been customers of Zoom for 3 years, and continue to basically be, and we envisage basically seeing that for a long time. And that's because of the announcements that you're seeing, the innovation, that's aligned with a lot of the needs that are happening in the customer workplaces. That's the solution.
So Casey, 2 words that have come up during this conversation, 2 very important words, are trust and empathy.
Yes, which IT people generally, we have a hard time with. I think in the old days we would code things and it was you only had how we designed it, and it was kind of, here you go, take it or leave it. And I think that it was because we were so saddled with really tough technology to deal with. And so with solutions, some of these new solutions coming out, we're actually able to partner and work really closely with our constituents and understand and listen, which we've had to learn that skill. But now we can actually do something about it, right? So whether it be Zoom or some of the other great products out there, you don't have to wait for 6 months while you stand up a server and do all the stuff you have to do.
That's really interesting. So Pradeep, when you have better technology available to you, it enables you to do your job more easily. That helps engender that trust. But empathy doesn't come because the technology is out there. Maybe it makes your job easier, but empathy is something different, though.
Correct. A lot of, when I joined with Cvent, the CIO had been there 17 years, and fabulous job of taking our products to where it is, help build things to where they are. But every company, even if somebody came in to Cvent now and probably polled the audience and talked to the teams, there are probably improvements that need to be done. So I think one of the big things is listening. And I would actually go out to various organizations, travel to the different offices, and just listen, absorb, do lots of town halls and get people to open up and kind of get the themes around what's not working, right? What's not enabling folks to get what they need done. And I would actually come in and we would actually basically pull these themes together, and I use the word beta. We beta different products in there. Like, gives you forgiveness if it's not perfect. Those early adopters will jump in there and love it, test it. But we do this across various locations, various groups as well to get the input. And in some cases, we actually let them kind of test out multiple products, and then we roll it out to a bigger audience. I think one of the nice things, in case you mentioned this as well, is today you don't have to wait for servers to be implemented and stuff. You can actually trial and test in a pretty rapid manner. And I think that simplifies, again, how quickly we can test, right? It's a lot of testing that we do, a lot of R&D type work that we do before we decide, okay, this is the one. Then we got to sell it, right, to the CFO, the CEO, head of sales, and all these organizations that says, hey, are you going to use this? Is this going to make a meaningful difference in how we live our lives?
But the beta testers end up helping you sell it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Biggest champions we have.
You know, I really love this concept of the CIO as Chief Listening Officer.
It's a skill.
Don't tell my wife
Absolutely
that.
is a skill. It's
Therapy.
a hard skill.
We give therapy.
It is.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
I think it also goes beyond the CIO, right? I think you definitely need to create that culture with your own IT organization. But I think, you know, back to the topic of not just being listening, but also how we drive change, I think we can also now set our aspirations level higher, right? To the point that we actually work with business teams on helping them think about changing the business. So some of it is us changing systems, but we really should look at a higher level, talking about, as an example, Logitech, how we work with the customer care team about, you know, how do you engage with customers instead of just a transactional support relationship? And can you create things like a customer community where people can help each other, change the model altogether? I think that's the type of change management that the CIO and the IT organization can help achieve for a company beyond just changing systems.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is that solutions that we are typically pitched or that we look at, from a decision-making perspective, it always boils down to, at least from my standpoint, a common denominator, which is how does this impact our ability as a company to be able to improve, A, the customer experience, or our ability to be able to earn more revenue, right? And I think part of the reason for that is that you know, IT organizations need to get much more closer to understand the context of it. It's not just about being the CIO of a tech company, right? It's actually, but one of the things is to basically say, which market are you operating in? And it doesn't have to be whether you're a CIO of a tech company or otherwise, but the more you're able to basically improve the company's ability to go to market, and that basically means how you connect the dots up. Like if you deploy out solutions like Zoom or Workday, are you making the company operationally efficient, providing a better customer experience and communicating with them, and therefore aiding the go-to-market organization in your way? Yes, right? And therefore, if you focus your deployment and enablement along those lines, that's how fundamentally the IT organization gets more respect to be able to do more and get more at
So if I can summarize our story so far, we have the bottom is the foundation is operational excellence. In other words, things just have to work. And then through the art of listening, we've developed trust, and we're bringing our own sense of empathy to it, which of course encourages that. And so now, as a result, the conversations that we're having are not about the technology. Yes, that has to work, it has to continue working, but it's not now about the technology. Right. It's about where are we going as a company, what are we doing, and so at this stage, what then becomes the role of the CIO, and how can IT as a whole now make this contribution?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just to, I guess, share my opinion, I think on top of everything you just described, really the approach in terms of harnessing the power of the collective employees and the workforce that you support, I think that's really the biggest focus now, right? Which is people bring ideas to you, and you can think about how you actually balance those, figure out ways to make them happen and support them in deploying these ideas. But the other thing is actually how people are working in different ways, right? So in agile teams or more distributed teams, how do you actually change the way of bringing products to market or the cycles to actually get time to market? So I think that role, from that point of view, so that whole being kind of the shepherd of technology and harnessing the power of the collective, I think is more importantly what the CIO needs to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would basically say it's kind of three core items for at least the IT organization and the CIO specifically. I think one is to be able to make sure that you're at a vantage point that you're able to operate and bring in productivity across the entire business. That's my number one objective, is to be able to improve the productivity of every single employee who works at Pure Storage. Number two is to be able to help drive a degree of innovation. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to basically sit down and say, okay, what's a great idea that I can basically do? It's actually about harnessing innovation across the business and being able to operationalize that, because fundamentally we'll boil down to the fact that how do we put this in place from a system perspective, or how do we get the data to be able to make that decision? You'll be able to drive that. And I think the third thing is really to be able to start to basically figure out how you can aid the company to be able to just transform as you basically move further forward, right? And actually that applies for any IT organization. It may focus on basically being, hey, being able to partner up with the CISO organization, and now security, of course, seems to be coming up every single time. And that enables for that partnership between IT and the security organization. Sometimes it's one and the same.
Yeah, I think the term Equifax comes to mind.
I mean,
Or Deloitte, maybe? Yeah.
Or, yeah, I mean, it doesn't, like I said, it's going to be a continuous, it will come up. And so does it enable you from an operational excellence standpoint to be able to partner up with the different organizations to be able to build a good foundation? So I think that's the third thing.
I think it was
Go ahead,
what
go
he
ahead.
said.
Somebody,
No, it was actually, you touched on something we didn't talk a lot about, which is sort of security, legal, privacy. Right? That is a big part of probably what I spend quite a bit of my time on as well. I also host our product, so uptime availability, but balancing features, right? That velocity that we need to do, right? So am I going to take some level? I'd love to have, great amount of velocity in terms of features, but also 100% uptime, or am I going to sacrifice a little to push ourselves forward? I also look at sort of the evolution as we're talking about business applications, right? From the role of CIO, automation, scale, globalization that we have going on. Right here, I was talking to somebody who's talking about, 606, we got to get ready for that. You hear CPQ buzzwords thrown out in terms of evolution. So these are all things that take up quite a bit of my organization's time as we look for the future. And then the other part of it, which I call sort of table stakes, which is that productivity, the simplification, the making all of our staff as productive as possible. To me, that is the one that we have to figure out how to make happen, because that touches everybody that we operate with.
I think this is where it gets fun. I think, you said, okay, there's these different layers. What's really fun is where you can say, what is different about your business, right? And you're able to help drive that conversation about how to make that better, right? What do we really focus on? As an investment organization, we spend a lot of time building relationships. So now, that's an interesting conversation. Can we innovate in how we identify relationships and how we drive that piece, and what can we use? And we've got the great knowledge or the tools in our tool belt to be able to say, these technologies would be really interesting. We can tie those together, and you can have these great conversations across the organization, helping drive them in directions they didn't even know were possible. So I think that's like the holy grail for me. Like, I think when we're like able to innovate and help drive a business to really succeed and be, better than its peers, or, do really well, then that's the fun stuff.
I really love that. This idea that IT can help support, identify and support the businesses, the organization's unique differentiation.
Yeah, instead of just whether the lights are on.
So what about metrics, measures, KPI? We've been talking about all of these very kind of squishy topics, happiness and trust and empathy. And the old days, it was pretty easy, right? System uptime, latency, it's pretty clear. Mm-hmm. What about now? What are the metrics and the measures? How do you think about this?
So I think one of the things that's happening now, definitely amongst my peer group, is that in the line of being, entire industries are really being kind of disruptive, because just the competitive threats are just immense, right? I mean, the ability for you to be able to create a product and take it to market and be a competitor to a traditional company is literally next to zero. And so I think what happens is, a couple of things that are happening. One is the level of data that's being ingested into businesses is growing exponentially. That's part of innovation. So, companies are deploying out more sensors. They're focusing in their products, whether it's Ducati motorbikes or BMW cars or Logitech cameras. right? And so therefore, I think what's happening is a lot of businesses are moving towards a much more data-driven culture to be able to make decisions by being able to ingest a data sets from all areas of their business, customer support, sales, finance, bookings, support, IT, and then be able to help drive those decisions. Now, part of the challenge is that there are 700 plus vendors in the big data space. That's literally 700 vendors who are trying to basically make pie charts like more 3D, right? And that's kind of the age of like the old big data. But I think now we're getting to a stage that we, my business partners and the exec team are definitively much more driven in saying, how do we make decisions in different markets, in different segments? How do we aid the sales productivity? How do we basically react to business changes? And I think that's going to be driven by data. And I think that's going to be a role that all of us are going to be involved in.
And I'm going to ask you guys to answer these questions very fast, so we have a few minutes left for questions from the audience.
Michael, just a couple of comments, I guess, from my point of view on the metrics, right? I think the metrics really changed to a level that they're more real business metrics, right? So it's no longer internal jargon about system uptime, availability, but it's really about time to market, like we're saying, or overall agility of the organization and how we actually get our products out to customers. So I think that makes it much more compelling. The only last thing I would say is the theme here is employee happiness, and I think we've all heard kind of the happy path of what CIOs can do. I think there's a dark side to this too, which is really, look at the automation, right? We're automating maybe 80% of knowledge workers' jobs. So what happens to those guys? And I think there's, 10-year predictions of what will happen and how that evolves. And I think as an IT leader, we also need to be ahead of that and really not just think about the positive, but also how we manage the changes that the negative could also inflict.
In a tweet-sized bite, how do you think about talent management and recruiting IT folks inside your organization who can possess these attributes of being trustworthy, having empathy? Very quickly. Complicated question, very quick.
Wow, tweet size, 40 characters?
Yeah, well, 140. This is it's easy.
I'm looking for people that can connect. People that can connect the dots in technology, can connect with people, can connect solutions with problems. So it's all about connection.
Yeah, I'm looking for folks that are self-motivated, can kind of go research, find out, come back with, I'm going to say solution now, because you can do that.
Hire more women. Go ahead.
All right, yes.
I'll do my tweet. Traditional IT doesn't cut it anymore. Must stop. We need different workers now, something like that.
Okay. And hire more women.
Hire more women. So we have 4 amazing CIOs, and are there questions from the audience? There's a mic in the center, I believe.
Somewhere.
So I can't see anything because of the lights.
Yeah,
there you go,
right
Mike's
up here.
Yeah, so there's a mic that is coming from the...
Anybody?
And so if you have a question, just go for it.
One right there.
Sir, please.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Ali from Konica Minolta. So really quickly, one issue that we are trying to deal with within our organization is this concept of shadow IT or phantom IT, where as employees we're scared to tell the IT teams that we use Slack or like other companies like Slack, and at the same time they want to be up to date, and every time we tell them that, oh, we want to use Slack, they're like, oh, we haven't tested it, we haven't done the security test, it's going to take 6 months. So kind of what's your view on just like phantom and shadow IT, and how do you kind of manage that? Thanks.
I'm going to get real here. It's like, get over it, folks. Like, say yes once in a while. I think we have been rushing our security reviews and things more quickly. When I first arrived, we had shadow IT everywhere, and it was exactly that. No one wanted to talk to us about anything. So we were getting cut out of the conversation, which means that's not where you want to be. So we've had to change our attitude a little bit and accept more things and take more risks and fail fast and implement things that we had doubts about. And it's okay, because if it doesn't work out, we just move on. So that's my
I in IT, actually, I run shadow IT groups. No, I'm kidding. We partner actually with those organizations, right? One, we kind of have to show that, hey, we're not afraid, right? And I think there's some traditional before, it's like, hey, if the CIO organization didn't come up with it, oh my gosh, we can't do that because it makes us look incompetent. So that's not actually the approach, right? There's great talent we have in the organization. People are going to find things. We should accept that and award that or recognize that and say, hey, when you do find that great thing, let us know so that we can help kind of do a security review on it. Make sure that it's safe for the organization. And you know what? In some cases, what I do is I say, hey, go ahead and do that. Keep us in the loop because we've got all these other things. If you think it's worthy, great, let us know, and then we'll figure out how to make it mainstream. So we follow a variety of different methods. We support it. I mean, we also don't believe in necessarily blocking something until we have a proper solution that's going to work for the organization in place, right? So the goal is not to be the CIO or prevent people from doing things. It's you want people to be able to get their job done, and if we're not doing a great job enabling that, then we want to partner and figure out how to make that happen. So that's our approach.
Yeah, I think the reason that shadow IT existed is because fundamentally the IT department was the party of no, number one, and number two, nobody knew where they sat or where they were placed, and number three, they were like, they don't get our department, whether it's marketing or sales, etc. I think the reality is that if you're able to build a partnership where you're able to actually facilitate a conversation, I actually think that's healthy. Right, and I think, so that's the genesis of shadow IT. I think the other piece is, it's about articulating the reasons for it. When you try to explain to people and say, by the way, you've just rolled this application out, there is company confidential data there. Like, do you really want that in the public domain? Right, and I think that's an easier conversation to have now because the level of kind of security, because it's in the mainstream, you can have that conversation, but it's about being able to have to articulate it on the level playing field by saying, what do you need to be productive? Right, and asking that question.
So Massimo, it's not just about going to say no because, because I'm the king or she's the queen.
Yeah, I wish those days are gone.
Those days
long
are
gone. But jokes aside, thank you. I'll need to go in therapy. But I think the shadow IT term, like you were saying earlier, I think is a symptom of something bigger. But I like to use something different, which is really business technology as the term, right? And the business of technology is everybody's business, right? So in the organization, if we acknowledge that technology is not single-handedly owned by IT, then you come up with a set of principles about what IT can do that others are maybe unable, like negotiate contracts at scale, warrant security, protect our company's assets and risks. I think that's a better way to actually position who's going to cover what when it comes to business technology.
So we have 2 minutes and 21 seconds left. There's no more questions. One more question, please. Make it a quick question.
I just have a follow-up question about shadow IT. So how do you justify the additional cost when some other groups are going and selecting other, because you are becoming an influential IT leader, so they go and select their own tool and then we make it a mainstream. So how do you justify the cost of multiple tools?
I think it's, I wish it was a straightforward opportunity, but I think it depends, right? Usually it also speaks to sometimes maturity of the organization, right? The leadership, sometimes the CIO themselves, right? Are they engaged or are they not? And more often than not, what I've noticed, it's when the CIO is not necessarily engaged is when that tends to happen. But if it happens under the kind of approval and agreement, then it is much more contained, right? So security, so where a bad choice of expense does not occur, or expenditure, does not occur, what we want to do is make sure that if somebody is doing a selection, well, let's go through the same proper controls that we have with procurement and the stakeholders who should be signing off on it, right? Let that occur so the right decision gets made. So when you see things like that happen, what we try and do is help correct it, not necessarily have to own it. Right? So
I think one thing is that it is getting very crowded pretty much in every market segment, whether it's marketing applications, sales, go-to-market, et cetera. So I think there's a couple of things that happen. One is you kind of need to have an IT organization. So we have a gentleman by the name of Dave Lavelle, who's kind of completely off the charts. He came from a cybersecurity background and then joined Pure Storage, but he was able to look at it from a vantage point of kind of security to be able to have that conversation. The second was to basically make sure that you say, if you're going to bring an application in, what are you taking out? And if it's additive to an existing stack, then it's a conversation to be say, how does this benefit this organization? That's a much more constructive conversation to be able to have. And that's why, like for example, when we brought in Zoom, we were able to rip out everything else that was in the space, right? Because we were able to say, if you're going to bring something in, I'm absolutely fine, but what are you taking out? Or if you are bringing this in, what problem are you trying to solve? And you've got to be reasonable by, marketing organizations and their demands are increasing and going into one area as well as sales, and so you can't keep saying no to that source.
Yeah.
And this conversation could go on for another hour, or 2 or 3, and in fact, you know what? Let's just do that.
We call it group therapy, actually.
But unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you, everybody. What's amazing CIOs.
Thank you.